After cleaning up the sprocket, what we've done is we've taken a brass punch, and that as a flat-ended brass punch, and a ball peen hammer, and we very gently from the back side tapped out the roller bearing and a dust seal. So what we're going to do now, and this is an exposed bearing, so it's not a sealed bearing, so what we're going to do is we're going to clean this up and we're going to repack this with grease, and then we can go ahead and install the bearing back in like this with the open face of the bearing facing upward, and then we can tap in the dust seal. So if you're going to clean your sprocket, you want to make sure you tap out that bearing, because if you get it in the solvent for cleaning, you're going to take out all the grease in this bearing. And what you want to do is you want, after you pull this bearing out, you want to rotate this bearing and make sure it's smooth and there's no clunking or banging or loose balls, because if it's bad, you want to replace this bearing. This one is really nice. It's smooth. There's no rough spots in it. So we're going to clean this bearing up. We're going to pack this bearing back in some grease, and then we're going to gently pound that bearing back in to the recessed area in the sprocket, and then we're going to go ahead and finish cleaning the wheel assembly and putting everything back together. To clean up this bearing, I sprayed some brake cleaner to get the solvent off of it, and now we're going to pack the bearing with some grease. Then what we're going to do is we're going to heat up this aluminum ring recessed area here with a torch to warm it up, get it to expand, and then we're going to put the bearing in and gently tap the bearing back down inside. I'll be showing you that as I do it. Let's go ahead and pack the bearing. I put the bearing in the freezer for just over an hour. Now we're going to take a propane torch and heat up the sprocket area where the bearing goes, and then we're going to insert the bearing in and lightly tap it in. This should make it go in a little bit easier. So we're going to try to pound that in some more. And then we want to get that down far enough so we can put the dust seal in. And we're going to check on the back. We have a little bit more, as you can see. So we're going to tap that down some more, and then we're going to put the dust seal in. Okay, we have the bearing and the dust seal seated. The bearing moves nice, so now nice and smooth. So now we have that mounted. We now can insert the bushings where they go. And now we're ready to put the sprocket assembly back in the rim, and then we can mount the wheel into the swing arm. We're going to mount the wheel and rim to the swing arm. Make sure that your brake caliper bracket, there's a groove on the inside of this. You want to make sure that that bracket is in that groove. Your rubber O-ring is facing this way. You can see the axle hole here. We're now going to take the axle, and notice there's flats on the axle. So we want to make sure that the flat is in there, and this is part of your adjuster right here. You want to make sure this is facing forward to the adjuster bolt. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get some grease, and we're going to lightly coat the axle in some grease. I like to put a teeny bit on the threads as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to insert the axle through the caliper bracket, and now comes the hard part. Now we're going to have to lift the wheel and feed that axle through the And as you can see, this is going to be somewhat of a pain, so I'm going to have to get some things lined up here off camera, and then I'll start the camera again. Okay, this was rather a pain to get in. So what we're going to do is slide that until the axle goes through on the other side. Notice there's the adjuster nut. The part of the adjuster bracket has to be facing forward. Same thing on the other side. This is the bracket that goes on the other side. So we'll slip that in and we'll hit the adjuster. Then what we can do is put the nut on lightly, and then we can put the chain on and adjust the chain, and then tighten the axle down. So let's go ahead and feed that from the other side. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the adjusters and run them all the way in so I can get the wheel and the axle lined up perfectly. And then what we'll do is we'll back, when we put the chain on, we'll back these adjusters out together, so we'll keep the axle and the rim and the wheel straight on the swing arm. We have the chain adjusters all the way in on both sides. We have the wheel in as far as we can. So now what we can do is we're going to go ahead and put the chain on from the other side, and then we can adjust the wheel and axle on the swing arm to take up any slack in the chain, and then we can start mounting the rear caliper and the rear master cylinder. I'll reposition the camera here. We can see what's going on the other side. I ended up having to purchase this bolt from Suzuki anyway. The longer bolt is hardened and I couldn't thread it. So in order to thread it, I would first have to anneal it, then thread it, then harden it, and then temper it. And that's just way too much work. So for $10, actually with tax about $13, I purchased a new bolt and we put it in. So then we'll go ahead and finish torquing everything up here, and then that should be it for the video on mounting the frame to the engine. We put the chain on. We've done the adjusters. At midpoint on the chain we have 20 to 30 millimeters of free play, and there's a way to measure the stretch on the chain. On each chain link there's 2 pins. So what you do is you measure 21 pins and then you measure the width. And if that width is over 319.4 millimeters, you have to replace the chain, and we're under that, so we're within spec there. We've also put the cover on the front sprocket. Now all we have to do is to tighten the axle nut, and that's 100 Newton meters of torque. So we're now going to tighten. And there's 100 Newton meters. Okay, we are now set. In the next video we can start putting on the brake calipers and the master cylinders. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you in the next video.